Glab alongside Steve Tasker. It is 2 o'clock, and you know what that means. NFL Films senior producer and co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup, Greg Cosell, joins us, and this segment is presented by Scott's Lawn Care. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time out of what I would assume is a very busy week of preparation for you, as is any time we talk to you. So thanks for hopping on with us here for about 20 minutes. A big matchup for the Bills here to open the season against the Super Bowl defending champions, the LA Rams. Before we kind of dive deep into the one-on-one matchups and little nuances of this game, bigger picture, bigger themes, where do your eyes go in this one?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Obviously you're dealing with two really good offensive teams. Defensively, both these teams have been very good, but I think for me, I'm really curious to see the offenses. And Ken Dorsey's a new coordinator. I would think that there'd be a lot of the same principles and concepts. The Rams have had the same offense essentially for years. There's tweaks. There's always tweaks. Coaches are always looking for new ways, but they don't totally change their entire approach. So to me, I'm really excited about this from an offensive perspective. But of course, the flip side of that is, what do the defenses do to try to potentially slow down these offenses?
Yeah, and I think too for both these teams, these aren't the same. These aren't the 2021 versions of these two teams. The Rams winning the Super Bowl, the Bills getting out in the divisional round, and both playing at a really high level at the end of the season. But there's been some tweaks and changes to their rosters, and most notably for the Bills defensively, they're going to start probably Dane Jackson and either Kaiir Elam or Christian Benford, a rookie on the other side of a Dane Jackson who started the second half of last year. That, to me, it screams for the Rams with Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson to go right after those guys.
Yeah, and I think they will. And I think one of the things that makes the Rams offense and pass game in particular so good is their use of formations. They're not just one of those teams that lines up and says, hey, here are our receivers, we're just going to win one-on-one routes. They are really good formationally. They are really good with the use of bunch, and obviously every team has a way to match up to bunch. There's 2 or 3 ways you can do that. I'm curious to see how the Bills choose to do it. A couple other things that really stood out a year ago when you watched the passing game for the Rams was they led the league by far in the number of empty set dropbacks by Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is very comfortable and empty. It kind of defines the defense, makes the defense declare. The Bills they're not a low percentage blitz defense, but I wouldn't say their calling card is their blitz, but it really defines things. You can define matchups as well. And as you said, Steve, it'll be interesting to see, will the Bills play less man coverage? Will they play more zone? Will they try to sort of, compensate for the fact that they may be playing with a rookie, as much as we all like Kaiir Elam or Benford? One of those guys is going to be out there, and Dane Jackson, who does not have a ton of experience either, against really quality veteran wideouts in Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson.
So we know the passing game is going to be something to look for, especially with Cooper Kupp's numbers that he had last season, leading the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. But are we overlooking the run game possibly, thinking about the passing game a little bit too much? Because they have 2 pretty decent running backs that could kind of wreck things for the Bills defense if they're not prepared for a guy like Cam Akers. So how could the Rams running game play a factor in this one?
Well, we know that they're going to run with some volume. We saw that in the Super Bowl. Even when they couldn't gain any yards, they stay with the run game. So as much as we talk about Stafford and obviously Kupp having that Triple Crown season a year ago, is Sean McVay always wants to run the ball because of what it does to the defense. And he believes in that. So again, we don't know how well they'll run it, but they're not a team that necessarily just comes out and throws it all over the yard. Now, they will take their shots for sure, but they are not a one-dimensional offense, and I think they will look to run the ball. Normally, the zone run game has been their foundation. One of the things that they've done through the years is they do a lot of sort of outside zone, stretch zone, because what that does is it gets the defensive line moving laterally as opposed to vertically rushing the quarterback. So it just slows down the pass rush for a beat. And it also can displace the second level defenders, linebackers, if you're playing zones, and create windows for throws.
And you talk about the way you get after Stafford, and yeah, use the running game to help him, no question about it. And he is comfortable going empty. But teams have tried a lot of things against him. He's the best quarterback in the league when he faces blitzing.
Yes.
When they send extra people, the guy's really, really good. And I know this too. A little bit of that has to do with receivers who can win real quick and get open. But the guy is not afraid of pressure, and that speaks to their ability and desire to go empty because the guy's just not afraid of it. Why is he so good against the blitz? And I guess that plays into a strength of the Bills because they don't like to blitz unless they really have to. They pick their spots. They're not a big blitz-heavy team. So even that kind of works in the Bills' favor, even the strength of the Rams. So how do you think that plays out with this? Certainly it's not going to change overnight. Matt Stafford's going to be really good even if the Bills send extra guys.
Yeah. Stafford, number one, he's been doing this a long time, and he's really smart. He's very aware. He sees things really quickly. He's always been willing, Steve, and I think this is a really important trait for an NFL quarterback. Because even though Stafford is not immobile, his game's built on throwing from the pocket, and he is willing to stand and deliver. Making contested throws in the NFL when you're a pocket quarterback is critical. Look, you played with one of the best there was at that, who would stand and deliver and make those throws at the last moment, knowing he was going to get hit. And Stafford's one of those guys. He does not flinch in the pocket. He's really tough in the pocket. And arm strength is one of those things, guys, that is talked about a lot with quarterbacks, particularly when they're coming out in drafts. I'm a believer in arm strength. You don't have to have a gun to be a good NFL quarterback, but Stafford has a gun. Josh Allen has a gun. Those guys can make some throws that others can't. And they're both willing to turn it loose. They're not cautious about delivering the football. Matthew Stafford, some people point out to the fact that he threw 17 interceptions last year. Obviously, no one says, hey, let's throw 17 interceptions. But my guess is that Sean McVay is not bothered by that the way some other coaches might be, because Stafford will also make some big-time aggressive throws into the teeth of coverage in situations where those kinds of throws are demanded.
Yeah, and Stafford, you say he does. He stands and delivers. But, he's coming into this. He's nursed an elbow injury throughout the preseason. He's had shoulder surgeries. He's had all kinds of problems, mainly in his career overall, mainly because he does stand in there, takes the hit, makes the throw, but he pays a physical price for that. And at this point of his career, it seems now coming into a brand new season, it's starting to catch up with him a little.
It's possible. Look, I remember his first 2 years in the NFL, he did not play full seasons, and everybody said he was fragile. And then he never missed a game until, maybe 3-4 years ago, he got hurt and played half the season. But other than that, he's played every single game. He is tough as nails. People might remember against Cleveland, was it when he had a separated shoulder, I believe, and he stayed in the game, something that was obviously painful.
I remember that. He came off the field, and then Cleveland called a timeout. That allowed him to come back onto the field, even though he was injured, and he delivered the Hail Mary touchdown pass. So, that was heroic. Absolutely no question. He's got that in him.
He's really tough. There's never, as players get older, Steve, and you know this, having, been around a long time doing this and having played, you never know that 1 year where maybe a player, takes a little bit of a step back. You never know when that's going to be. Obviously, Stafford is coming off an outstanding season, a Super Bowl winner. He's been a great, great thrower of the football ever since he was in high school in Texas. I remember Mel Kiper saying when he came out of high school that he'd be the number one pick in the draft, 4 years down the road, and he was right. Stafford's a great thrower of the football. We all focus on Patrick Mahomes these days. Stafford was making those kinds of throws back, early in his career. It's just he was on a bad team and they never won. So my guess is he's not all of a sudden going to be a bad thrower of the football. We don't know, what happens if he starts getting hit and maybe his body starts to fall down a little bit. I mean, I remember talking to John Elway years and years ago, telling me that the reason he retired is not because he didn't think he could play anymore, is because he told me that his body didn't start to feel better till like Saturday, the day before the next game, whereas early in his career, his body felt okay like on Tuesday,
Right.
and,
Oh, yeah.
and, that's what starts to happen. You know that, Steve.
I remember those days. Yeah, that's why I retired.
So the Bills' offensive line is going to have a really tough test against Aaron Donald. Of course, thankfully, the Bills have somebody on their side now that they've gotten to go up against in practices. And we talked to Deion Dawkins this week, and he said, Von Miller has really helped my play this offseason. He has won against me so many times and has taught me so many different tactics and things that I can do to win against really good players. What does the offensive line for the Bills, with some new faces this year too, some new starters, need to do to try and slow down a crazy good athletic freak in Aaron Donald?
Yeah, and we know Donald's great, so we don't need to really spend a lot of time on that, Maddie. But I think let's find focus just a little, because we can't talk about every element of that. One of the things they're going to see that the Rams do exceptionally well and is very difficult to pass protect against is the Rams line up in what we call loaded fronts, meaning they'll line up with 3 defensive linemen to one side of the offensive center, and then they'll have the 4th defensive lineman line up outside the other offensive tackle. That's very difficult to block, because from that loaded front, the 3 defensive linemen, comes a lot of different stunt looks. Even if they don't stunt, what often happens is sometimes you get Donald with a running start attacking a guard. And the one thing about guards, no matter how good they are, space is not the friend of guards. Guards like to work in confined areas. And when you have Aaron Donald running at you with a 5 or 6 yard, distance to start, and a two-way go, essentially, that is a difficult deal. So that's just something I think fans can look for in this game. You're going to see that loaded front with 3 defensive linemen to one side of the offensive center.
What do you give any credence to the fact Roger Saffold has been a part of the Rams team? He knows Aaron Donald, has practiced against him. And there's also film from just 2 years ago with Mitch Morse playing center, who they had to deal with Aaron Donald and watched him really wreck the game a little bit in Buffalo in week 3, I believe, in 2020. So how big a help can that be?
I mean, obviously, the more you know about an opponent, the better. I mean, that's obviously what study is, and that's what position coaches also work on with players. It's, they try to find those little nuances, those little details based on a stance, based on where a guy lines up. Hey, when he lines up in this spot, he's, tendency says he'll do these 2 things. When he lines up in this spot, tendency says he'll do these 2 other things. You try to have all that information at your disposal. But he's also such a unique physical talent that sometimes he's just going to win because he's better. You try to minimize that. You obviously hope that doesn't lead to turnovers. The one advantage, too, that the Bills have is Josh Allen can move. So you hope that if Donald wins early, then maybe Josh can make a play with his legs and avoid the truly negative play that can shut down drives.
A new piece that the Rams have to their defense is Bobby Wagner, and we know Aaron Donald and what he can do. We know Jalen Ramsey and what he can do. How they decide to use Bobby Wagner in this defense is kind of the big question mark, and a lot of our offensive players have been saying, we don't have tape to watch on this, so this is going to be an in-game adjustment type thing for us. We're not sure exactly how they're going to plug and play and place Bobby Wagner. How do you expect them to use a really talented linebacker in Bobby Wagner?
Yeah, and Maddie, what I think you'll see, I mean, look, when Brandon Staley left prior to last season and they brought in Raheem Morris, Sean McVay wanted to keep continuity with the defense because they were really, really good under Staley. So essentially, the structure and foundation of the defense stayed the same a year ago. I would expect it to be similar. They're a really good defense. So Wagner is going to be a stacked player, and they line up both in 4-2 fronts and in 5-1 fronts. So Wagner will be a stacked player. Now, because he's so intelligent and so smart, he'll move around in a stacked position. And in fact, sometimes he might even blitz. But it's the fact that he's a good player more than he's going to be used in some kind of creative different way. I think he's going to fit in to what they do because their defense is really good. He's just going to do it better than the players they had, in the last year or two playing inside.
Well, let's flip the switch and talk about one of the Bills' linebackers. He's listed as a linebacker. He's actually a defensive end in a 4-3, Von Miller. How does he change the equation what knowledge can he bring? He's got to bring a lot of just personal knowledge about what the Rams are doing, what their philosophies are, how they think, but also his ability to rush the passer.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is he can win one-on-one. And I think the key thing is when you can win one-on-one, sometimes that changes the way the offense, has to deal with you. So the question is, what will the Rams do? In let's say, 3rd down and 8 situations, let's say, will the Rams decide that, you know what? We need to keep a tight end into chip. We need to keep a back into chip. Maybe we need to keep a tight end in as a primary pass protector. So, Steve, as you know, if you do that, then obviously it's a numbers game. There's fewer receivers that can release immediately into routes. And if you're only rushing 4, then you have 7 in coverage. And that if it's 7 in coverage, let's say, versus 4 receivers, or maybe even 3 primary ones, hopefully you have the advantage. And again, that gets back to Stafford, because Stafford is more than willing to make those really tight window throws, and there's few in the league better at that. But you're hoping that that's the case, that Miller is good enough in this given game, week 1, where they force the Rams to have to deal with him and not just allow him to be one-on-one versus the left or the right tackle.
Another new player for the Buffalo Bills this year is running back James Cook, who could be used as a mismatch in this game. When we spoke to Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator for the Bills, he said, I hope James Cook can get some touches in this one. It'll depend on the flow of the game with how he's used in this one. So we're not sure what Ken Dorsey is cooking up yet, but if they decide to use James Cook in this one, what do you think could be some advantages for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah. My sense is, and look, I'm not there, but my sense is that's coach speak. I think James Cook's going to play because James Cook is a weapon. And James Cook is certainly a weapon in the pass game, and I think that you will see him used that way. That to me would be the way that he will be used early in the season. Maybe as the season progresses, he'll get more carries, but I think in the pass game, both offset in the gun and detach from the formation, and they'll see how the Rams handle that. The Rams are one of those teams because they do play sort of that Vic Fangio defense that kind of starts with a 4 across quarters structure, but it doesn't really play out that way. So that it's a difficult defense to play against from a coverage perspective, because what you see before the snap is not normally what you see after the snap. But I think what you want to do as an offense is put enough weapons out there that they have to deal with those weapons as well, so that they have to be a little defensive about how they go about playing.
One of the things about James Cook also is it's one more option inside the numbers, basically, for a passing offense. We've got already a slot receiver in Isaiah McKenzie who brings a little bit of edge of speed to the equation. You throw James Cook in there with Dawson Knox, and you got a tight end and a slot and a running back. All of a sudden, inside the numbers seems to get really crowded with options. What's a defense do if you've got all 3 of those guys, a slot, a tight end, and a running back in the backfield? What's a defense do with those kind of things inside the numbers that with so many options for a quarterback that can, just dump it?
Well, here's another thing, I talked about earlier what to look for with the loaded front. One thing you might want to look for with the Bills offense is this, is Diggs as the single receiver to the boundary, where there's 3 receivers to the other side, Cook as the back offset to the boundary, and then Gabriel Davis as the inside slot receiver to the trip side. Because with Cook and Diggs to one side of the formation, 2 really good receivers, and then you put speed at number 3 to trips, that's a difficult deal in this league for defenses. So that's one thing to look for, because, with Cook and Diggs to one side, that's a tough deal for a defense, how they choose to match up. And that's where I think you'll see a lot of the wrinkles that this sort of Vic Fangio-based defense has. But I think not that you put them in a bind, but you'll want to see how they react to that.
Right.
Greg, you spoke to how this Vic Fangio defense could look different pre-snap versus after snap.
Yep.
Josh Allen is in his 5th season in the NFL and year after year has progressed at diagnosing defenses, being able to see some of that pre-snap and post-snap and being able to make that quick decision. How do you think he might grow here in this 5th year? How did you see him last season be able to pick up some nuances of defenses?
I think he got a whole lot better. I mean, even it was in a game they lost. I remember that Monday nighter with Tennessee, and obviously we'll talk about that next week. But I remember the Week 6 game last year. Tennessee did a lot with disguise and late movement, and I thought Josh made some really good throws and handled it well. Look, they're a good defense. They're going to get him on some snaps. I mean, this is the NFL. You know, all 40 dropbacks, let's say, are not going to be perfect for Josh Allen. It's never like that. So there'll be times where they get him, where, what he sees and thinks he's seeing is not exactly what he's seeing. But I think he's improved dramatically in that area. I think when you watch him, this is not an X and O point, but I think he's a more comfortable player than he's ever been. And I think he just feels that in the way in which he plays. He sees things quicker. He sees things better. But there will be plays where he drops back and maybe he doesn't get a clear picture. And that's where the running does come in, because, a true pocket quarterback, if it's a drop back and he doesn't get a clear picture, he probably throws it away. Josh doesn't have to throw it away. He can try to do something else.
Greg, I know you hate doing this. What do you think about this game? I mean, who do you give the? I know the electricity and all the hype. The Bills are like the blah 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 blah. What do you think about how this matchup's going to go?
God, I'm so tough with those, Steve, as you know.
It's hard.
I mean, I would love to see it. I'm sure that Leslie Frazier and Sean wouldn't. But I mean, as a fan watching tomorrow night, I'd like to see a game that at least plays out like the Bills Chiefs game, where it's big plays, a lot of offense. I mean, to me, those games are fun. I love watching great quarterback play, and you got two of the best in the league. So, I'd like it to be that kind of game. But like I said, Week 1 is always unpredictable. I mean, I don't think anybody's thinking it's going to be a 10-7 game, but I would certainly enjoy a 38-35 game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we would enjoy that as well. Hopefully it lives up to the hype. We've been talking about it long enough. But Greg, thanks for joining us here on this Wednesday afternoon.